Hi, it's Crafty. Today I thought we'd try something new called stamped embroidery. If you haven't already heard, there's something called Zenbroidery, which is a take on the adult coloring book. If you've never tried anything like that, I thought this would be a great introduction to see if it's something that you would like to do. I chose this pattern of Be Yourself, and I just want to show you what is inside. So here is your needle. There's instructions. Here's your fabric that's printed. That's what you're going to be working on. Before you begin, you want to make sure you read over the entire instructions. There's actually not a lot. It's not very involved, but you definitely want to read through it. As you can see, they have 3 steps listed, and they're slightly vague if you've never tried a project like this before. This kit does not include an embroidery hoop, but it just so happens that I have one. So you would put your inside hoop down first, your fabric, and then your outside hoop, and then you would tighten it. Before you do any of these, I highly recommend you iron your piece. I'm going to start first with the felt appliques. Make sure you know where your pieces are going to go before you start stitching anything. I'm going to go through this project one step at a time, and then I'll pause it so you don't have to watch me do every stitch, but we will be referring back to the instructions. As you see, we're going to start with this stitch. That's where you find it, the color, and how many strands you're going to need. To begin, we're going to start with the flower stems. First, we want to separate out our strands. And for this stem, it said you need 2 strands, so we're just going to thread our needle and get started. Once your needle is threaded, you can keep it simple by just making a knot at the end, particularly if you've never done a project like this before. As you can see, we're going to start in the back, and you can see the pattern through the back, which is pretty helpful. Start your stitch at the very edge. The idea is to cover the entire print. Always spot check the back to make sure that your thread hasn't knotted up. Once you've finished with the first stem, proceed to the other 2 stems. I'm going to start with the felt leaves. I just line them up to make sure they're all in the correct places and that they cover the stamp lines. For the leaves, I'm going to start with the center stitch. That's going to hold it in place when I stitch around each leaf later. Just so you know, don't get frustrated, the needle doesn't always go easily through the felt. Also, during this project, you'll notice that I'm putting my finger through the thread. That's to prevent it from knotting, and that can happen a lot, so definitely pull your thread slowly. And always check the back. When you're done, your back should be almost as nice as the front. Now that the leaves are on, we're going to refer back to our instructions. So for this stitch, to stitch around the leaves, we're going to do 1 strand of light green. Start your stitch in the back and pull it through. Go back into your fabric right next to it so that you have a straight line. However, you're going to find on the back, it's eventually going to create a diagonal pattern. On to the flowers. So we're going to begin by referring to the instructions. As you can see in the center, there's this dotted pattern. We're going to find that on our chart, and that's a dark brown in a double strand. This is the part where I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm more comfortable stitching in my hand than I am on the cloth itself. So I'm just going to make the X and then I will attach the flower afterwards. Once that's done, I'm going to refer back to the instructions, and I see that in order to stitch it around, I'm going to need 1 strand of orange. Once again, I'm going to do that separate from the project, but at any point in time, you can do it right through your main fabric. You're just making a few stitches around your center of your flower. This is very similar to what you've already done with the leaves. Referring to the pattern, I'm finally going to stitch it on using 5 long stitches. This is using orange thread in a double strand or 2 strands. After each stitch, just turn your project slightly for the next one. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. The whole idea is that this is handmade, especially if it's a gift for someone. What makes it most endearing is that it is imperfect. Now that those long strands are going to hold it to the project, we can stitch around with the yellow thread in a single strand. Now's a good time to check and make sure you don't have any knots in the back. Once you've completed the first flower, you have practiced all the stitches that you're going to need for the next 2 flowers. This is what the back should look like so far. Next, we'll be moving on to the lettering, and for that, we're going to be doing 2 strands in blue, and this will be done in a back stitch. Starting at the very end of your letter, you're just going to make a simple stitch. The most important thing is to stay on the line because you need to cover it. For the following stitch, you're going to come back up through the back, and your needle is going to go between the 2 strands. This way it gives the appearance of one long line. Now's a good time for some tips. When you're going around a curve of a letter, keep your stitches small so that you can stay on the line. Keep your front stitch loose until the needle has come through the 2 strands, and then you can pull it tight. Feel free to use longer stitches when you're doing a straight part of a letter. So that's your last stitch. You're just going to tie it off with a knot in the back, and as you've noticed, I use my needle to make my knot as tight as possible. Now on to the B line. We're going to refer back to our instructions. find it on your chart, and you're going to see that you're going to need 2 strands and a dark brown. For this part, you're just going to use the easy stitch that you started with when you began with the stems. Using the same thread, we're going to move on to the bee's wings. Because this project took longer to film than I had expected, I'm going to have to post it in 2 parts, so I apologize in advance, and I will post them at the same time. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.